Want more Achewillow but can't wait for Season 8? Good news! If you pre-order Achewillow Book 1, you'll have access to an exclusive bonus story during the month of September. One more reason to pre-order your copy now at achewillow.com/book. Achewillow Season 7 Chapter 15 1 Cream, 2 Sugars. Why do we have to do this at night? It takes some effort on my part to ignore how grating Ophelia's voice can be. With everything that's happened in recent days, I've begun to wonder how much of this is annoyance due to our shared experience and how much is natural reaction to how she is. The evening looks strange under this new sky. Even after a full day, I still can't reconcile with an Achewillow unmarred by the shadow of the great cloud. Many times I thought of the immobile cumulus as some ominous presence. In its absence, I find myself missing its comfort. It's going to be a beautiful night, I can already tell. A slight wind is cooling down the air from the day's intense sun, and the orange glow on the horizon heralds a clear sky. Looking across the street from Achewillow Border Park, I see a handful of open windows from people hoping to air out their homes. Because you couldn't get here sooner, I explain, adjusting the strap on my bag. Well, she replies, mimicking my gesture, maybe it'd be easier to schedule this if I wasn't in the process of getting exiled from my home. Quick scrutiny of her features fails to reveal how much she knows. There's a darkness looming farther down the road, a time when I'll have to tell her of my involvement in her troubles. Part of me hopes we'll still be enemies by that point. Some things are easier to spit in the face of a nemesis. We can bicker later, I say, waving her veiled accusations aside. We're already late as it is. Are you sure you know what to do? Ophelia looks around the park, then back up the street to where her yarn shop still remains. There's a sad longing in her eyes, a yearning for something slippery that's fallen from her grasp. She adjusts the woolen shawl over her shoulders, an accessory that makes her look twice her age but also seems excessive in this weather, before starting to walk. As much as anyone, that's the thing about unprecedented feats of magic. There's no precedent. You have to trap at least 2 or 3 gods and goddesses before you can reliably write an instruction manual. Ophelia turns and smiles up at me. It's almost as if it were a genuine attempt at humor on her part. Most likely, though, it's just nerves. Mother knows I'm feeling mine frayed to the breaking point. Nice. Only 1 or 2 more after this, and we'll be good. The sun falls behind the tree line much faster than I want it to. I don't know if it's a symptom of the new environment or nature itself pulling at the glowing orb, but night seems in a hurry to arrive. If I expected an ominous display in or around the forest, I was headed for disappointment. No hovering menace of thunderclouds or the eerie glow of unnatural forces at play. As we cross the Pickering fields, I hear the farm's dogs, Darling and Dragon, barking, but that isn't so unusual. It's only once we make our way across the ditch and into the shadow of the nascent foliage that I notice the changes. By this point, my bag weighs heavy. The cumbersome equipment and variety of plastic containers and bottles that rattle in there remind me of my recent treks to Fig's Orchard. Oddly enough, I feel a similar purpose driving me on. The prospect of trying to find the thorn door with all this baggage is as daunting as doing dishes after a banquet. Fortunately, a light shines at the end of the tunnel. Quite literally, in fact. What have you unleashed, Miriam? Ophelia's question comes out as a murmur, and I can find none of her usual recrimination woven between the words. Instead, there's a hint of awe and reverence there. Not for me, of course, but rather for the phenomena unfolding before us. Subtle, as if only happening in the shadows when we aren't looking, the trees are reshaping themselves, bending and moving to form a path or tunnel. Thick branches and needles from evergreens form an impenetrable canopy that obscures the sky. Trunks, thick and sturdy, become walls on either side. Meanwhile, ferns and moss line the floor, unraveling into a lush green carpet for us to walk on. Welcoming, isn't it? I offer in return. Ophelia answers with a twitch of her broken finger and moving ahead of me. Cut off from the sky, the rising moon and the shining stars, the only source of light comes from our destination. A straight line has been cut between us and the clearing of the Hell Gate. Welcoming might have been too weak a word. We're being led down this corridor whether we agree to it or not. "You came back," a voice greets us as we enter the clearing. "And you brought with you a familiar face." The clearing, too, has changed. Where it was once empty but for the woven frame of thistle and branches, it is now an abundant, if wild, garden. Fruits and flowers that have no business in this northern climate crowd the ground at our feet. Branches from surrounding trees hang low, weighed down by fungus, thick out-of-season leaves, and nests for birds and bugs alike. There would be beauty in such an unchained display of nature if not for the excess. This unleashed chaos overwhelms the senses. Sweet and rotting smells assault the nose, while colors and lights confuse the eye. Thick, near-tropical humidity weighs down at our clothes and turns our skin sticky and moist. William, Ophelia's cat familiar, pokes his head out of her bag, sniffing at the air with open fear and hostility. His eyes dart from one bioluminescent flower to a flittering insect and then to a budding flower on its stem. "We're here to finish what I started," I proclaim, straightening my back and adjusting the strap on my shoulder. "And get my friend back." Vines slither and uncoil from the undergrowth, unraveling from beneath weeds and ferns, weaving themselves into a fresh form. In less than 3 breaths' time, they pull together into limbs, a torso, and finally a head. As before, fruits, fungus, and grass grow to fill in the details, becoming an effigy of Petunia Marshall. "Your friend is bound to me as I am bound to that." The peat goddess moves aside to reveal the Hell Gate, the only part of the clearing to have remained unchained. "Break that link," she continues, "and the chain will fall apart. I will be free. Your friend will be free. Balance will return to this place." I watch as Ophelia is drawn to the portal, bag slung under her arm. The majesty and terrible wonder overgrowing every inch of the clearing has no effect on the yarn witch. She's focused on one thing alone, like a thread through a needle. "How? Tell us how and we'll do it." Ophelia looks back over her shoulder, a throwaway glance to let me, or the goddess, know she's on board. Pete's effigy slithers forth, closing the distance between us so that her fungus lips hover within an inch of my ear. "Dufour magic bound me," it says. "Dufour magic can break me free. You've already begun." I gag as a cloud of spores erupts from her skin, choking me with wet decay. "Weaken it," Ophelia calls from the side of the portal. Her wounded hand caresses the thistle and branches still surrounding her mother's skull. I imagine blood running down her fingers again, dripping into the forest floor. "Keep it from healing. I'll do the rest." Weaken it, I think, putting my bag down and pulling out all the things I'd brought. There's a small camping stove, a saucepan, and a skillet, all the utensils I might need and every basic ingredient a chef could desire. Flour, sugar, yeast, and salt, along with butter, oil, and spices. And at the bottom of the bag, the Dufour family cookbook. A recipe to sap the strength isn't something I'm comfortable doing, nor is it a dish I ever envisioned myself cooking. It goes against what it means to prepare food for others, to welcome them to my dining room, and to set the table at which they sit. It is not what Doris would do. Flipping through the pages of the Dufour grimoire, however, I know what to look for. I search for the dog-eared pages and the ragged notes put down in red ink. I look for the recipes that are incomplete and the ingredient lists that end in angry scribbles. There's only one within the Dufour line that I know to go against the grain in such a fashion. I browse in haste, hungry to find the perfect entry, all the time wondering to myself, what would Philomene do? The easy answer is that I don't know. I've never met Philomene, obviously, and the only people who might have crossed her path are also dead. She's a legend and a rumor, a strange knot in the grain of my family tree. But knowing just that can be enough. Through her recipes and how they're laid out, I can see a pattern in her madness. Philomene wrote of her dishes from 2 points of view. First, there's a youthful, wild, but elegant approach. Words and ingredients that flirt with the normal. It's only when she came back with red ink, scratching out whole portions of her works, that things take a turn. Something happened to Philomene that had her reconsider everything she had written down. It's in that fork in the road that I'll find what I'm looking for. Elderberry jam. Delicious, sweet and tart elderberry jam. The only problem is I didn't bring any elderberries, which would only be a problem if I did not have access to the whole of what grows and lives at my fingers. These. I hold up the book in front of the nature goddess's mucus and vegetable eyes. I need these. She smiles, her mouth a crack in a slab of mossy bark. Why, of course. With a gentle wave of her arms, she bends the forest to her whims. Around me, like an army raising from the dead, hundreds upon hundreds of elderberry bushes sprout from the ground. Their growth is accelerated, hastened by divine will, up until they reach maturity. Ripe berries by the millions glisten all around, more than I could ever cook in a lifetime. That'll be enough, I stammer. Ophelia, a hand? Like children, we pick berries, gathering them in the cloth of our shirts, staining our clothes black with juice. Our fingers grow purple as we gather copious amounts of fruit, pouring them into a large mound next to my portable stove. Don't eat any, I instruct. And don't worry about removing the stems or leaves. I need those too. Dutifully, I rinse the berries in a colander, using bottled water to the best of my abilities. I make no effort to filter out unripe fruit or remove stems and flowers. Then I crush them in my saucepan with some water, pulling out all the juices before bringing it to a boil. Sugar is soon added while I let the whole thing simmer. Then I crush a few fresh berries and even milk the branch of the plants for some of their sap. This is the part of the recipe that Philomene etched in red upon the pages of our recipe book. It's the part that I suspect will serve my purpose. Time ticks by as I simmer the berries, allowing them to thicken. Ophelia studies the thorn portal as if she were seeing it for the first time. Her nimble fingers run along the branches, like a child trying to solve a maze on the back of a cereal box. It's only when the jam nears being ready that I add the fresher berries and sap from the elderberry plant. Far from a lethal dose, perhaps less than needed to make any healthy adult seriously sick, but that's where intent and magic come into play. Dessert's ready, I announce, taking the still bubbling pot to the foot of the portal. Is now the time for mirth, Miriam? Ophelia's snark is back, but with a little less bite than before. Have you figured your part out? She nods, the determined frown on her face a welcome change from the traditional hostility. With a sigh, I start pouring the jam at the foot of the gate. The sweet and tart smell of elderberries assaults my nostrils as I scrape the side of the pot with my wooden spoon, spilling the contents in as even a pattern as possible. There's something else in the air, riding alongside the tasty aroma. It's the bitter scent of rotting almonds, and the more of the jam makes it to the forest floor, the stronger the smell. I expect the reaction to take a few minutes before occurring, The roots of the Hellgate need to drink the toxins and feed on the malicious intent stirred within the jam. I'm wrong. The effects are quick and violent. Black spots grow over the surface of the branches, closest to the soil. Putrid and vile, they spread like dots of rain on gray canvas. After a moment, they begin to creep up, infecting every twig and every leaf on the portal. Vines curl and wither as the bark splinters and cracks. Sickly sap oozes from the wounds, dripping down in thick rivulets. It won't last, the nature goddess's avatar warns. You must act quickly. The poison has spread to her as well. In fact, the entire clearing is falling under the power of my spell. Plants shrivel and die while the insects and small animals that swarm the living effigy perish and putrefy. Eggs resting in a small nest on Petunia's shoulder rot and crack, revealing the dead skeletal remains of that once promised life. A once radiant grapefruit turns gray within seconds, its rind sloughing off to reveal a hive of dying wasps. My jaw drops at the horror my cooking has wrought. Step aside! Ophelia wiggles her way past me, getting dangerously close to the portal. Her cat hisses, his nose twitching with displeasure. Me too, William. Me too. The knitting witch studies the portal again for the last time. Steeling herself for the task, she pulls up the sleeves on her blouse and wraps her shawl around her hands. Taking a hold of a single vine twisted near the bottom of the portal, Ophelia pulls. At first, nothing happens, and I'm tempted to lend my strength to her effort, but then the vine budges. First, she pulls it out by an inch, then another 3 inches. Soon, she's unraveling foot after foot of the portal. Blood seeps through her shawl as the thorns and branches tear into her flesh, yet she does not slow down. When her first branch gives out, succumbing to the weakness of my poison, she grabs another, strategically chosen to destroy the portal further. Every choice Ophelia makes is done with studied precision. She knows exactly which thread to pull that will unknit the portal fastest. Tears run down her face as the branch holding her mother's skull falls apart. I rush to catch it, walking the precious artifact back to safety. Other items drop from the portal as it disintegrates. Bones and tools and toys and trinkets, each a sacrifice brought here to bridge the real world from the place called the Inferno. As fast as the process began, it comes to an end. The last of the portal unknots itself in Ophelia's hands. Fingers red but empty, she leans on her knees, panting and crying. Looking back at the nature goddess, I wonder, is it over? A scream and a rumble, signs of a little apocalypse, tell me that it is not. A threshold can be torn down, but that does not seal the doorway. Ophelia screeches and scrambles backward, her heels kicking at the ground to escape the widening hole next to her. Surrounded by the remains of the Hellgate, branches of rotting and diseased vegetation, it's a struggle not to fall into this opening maw in the forest floor. Only through the help of Petunia's effigy, extending tendrils of her own for us to latch onto, do we not slip into this ravenous mouth yawning open at our feet. My saucepan and camping stove are swallowed, along with my bag of utensils and ingredients. Ophelia holds fast to her bag while William digs his claws into her arm, struggling to find higher ground. Careful, Petunia warns, her ever-changing face mere inches from ours. This is not a place you want to go. The bottom of the hole is neither dark nor light. Rather, it's a color mortal eyes weren't meant to comprehend. Whatever is at the bottom of this pit, it is neither good nor evil, nor is it indifferent. There's a quality to the emanations of sound and smell that feels so absolute in their humanity that they circle right back to being alien. Forced to come up with a single word to describe what screams out of the chasm, I would have to settle on excess. But we destroyed the portal! Ophelia pulls herself farther up, shoes kicking. The gate is gone and my freedom won, but the passage remains. Now, Miriam. There's little mystery about what the goddess is about to say. I've seen the offer before. She holds out her hands again, as she did the previous night. In one, she holds an apple, red and ripe with promise of life and bounty. In the other, the portal again, woven this time from the smallest flower stems and blades of grass. Choose, Miriam Dufour. I can either close this gate forever or give your dying friend another chance. Ophelia stares me down, eyes the size of buttons as the reality of my choice sinks in. Without hesitation, her hand snaps at the portal in Petunia's hand, but the effigy is too fast, moving the prize away. My bargain is with the Dufour witch, not you. There are hints of impatience and hostility in the goddess's voice, but her attention is soon brought back to me. Quickly, little cook. I can feel Petunia struggling for her freedom. This form is ephemeral, and I will soon have no more mouth with which to speak, no more ears with which to hear your answer. Left arm coiled around the branches to keep from falling, I hover with my right over my options. My fingers brush against the apple's skin, its surface smooth and taut under my touch. If I pick Olivia's life, am I now responsible for any death that might crawl out of the portal? And if I don't, have I killed my friend, my Achewillow mother? You can't, Miriam, Ophelia insists. You, above anyone, knows you can't. Her words blur, swallowed by the screaming of the pit and my own heartbeat. The hands holding my options are withering still, and I can see patches of human skin peeking from underneath. Out of time, out of breath, I close my eyes, and I close my hand. I'm sorry. The world vanishes from beneath me. Before I can open my eyes again, I'm thrown into the void. Chaos tosses me around as up becomes down and left becomes right. Gripped by primal fear, I curl into a ball, hands covering my scalp and knees brought up to my chin. The only thing I still hold on to is my wooden spoon. Rocks and branches welcome me to the ground, my left side erupting in pain as every inch of it is instantly bruised. There's no bouncing or rolling, my limbs instead settling like a sack of flour dropped on the kitchen tiles. Sounds and smells are all sucked from the clearing, swallowed into nothing, leaving only a silence so absolute it might as well be alive itself. And just like that, now, it's over. Slits of struggling light appear before my eyes, the timid opening of my lids as I try to gauge the reality of my situation. Above me, towering pines and burgeoning maples reach for distant stars. A moon not quite full floods the clearing in cool and soothing light. As I pull myself to my knees and then my feet, I can see vines crawl all over the forest floor, sealing whatever is left of the Hellgate before falling dormant once again. In one hand, my wooden spoon remains, its tip forever stained with the dark purple of elderberry jam. In the other, the crumbling remains of flower stems and blades of grass. A low moan, like the complaints of a sick child, rises from the fallen vegetation. Ruins of abundance litter the clearing's ground, tripping me over as I attempt to navigate and find the source of the sound. Ophelia? I call out, surprised to find myself worried for her well-being. Random strands of colorful yarn still rain from the heavens, the last vestiges of the upheaval. An orange mass emerges from between fallen vines to bat at them. William the cat finally showing his more belligerent side. I'm fine, Ophelia replies at last. She pulls herself from the ground, tearing at the remaining thorns and thistles still attached to her clothes and skin. Rivulets of blood trace canals and estuaries over her arms and face. Everything she pulls from her seems to hurt, judging by her wincing and gritting of teeth. She's a mess, but a resilient one, I must admit. Even through the dim light of the forest, I can see her hazel eyes, bloodshot but determined. Without even looking in my direction to assess how well I fared, she begins digging through the once living debris. The moan rises again, not from Ophelia, but instead echoing forth from a mound of vegetation. A quivering mass of broken bark, random fruits, husks of dead vegetables, and a variety of fungi and leaves, all shaken by something trying to free itself. "I can't believe," Petunia says, emerging from the tangled ruins. "This is happening to me again." Naked under the faint moonlight, my friend rises to her feet, wiping her eyes and yawning. She sniffs, wipes her nose with the back of her hand, and takes a moment to assess her situation. I would have expected more confusion from her, perhaps even some fear and panic. It'll be some time before I can find the proper way to describe what happened to my friend, but in this moment, it seems almost routine to her. "Has this happened to you before?" I'm compelled to ask. "Waking up naked in the forest? Oh yeah. The rest? Not at all." She inspects her arms, then her entire body. Her skin is unmarred, and her hair looks as if it were freshly blow-dried. In a way, she reminds me of Botticelli's Venus, except instead of surf, it's from the very forest she is born. "Are you okay?" Petunia gives her body a cursory inspection, unbothered by her nudity. "My scars and tattoos are gone," she complains. "I earned those." She shivers, then forces a smile, a weak attempt to brute force her trauma away with cheer. "We should get you home," I suggest, "before you freeze to death." The weight of reality settling upon her shoulders, Petunia nods. Whatever levity she had upon waking up is quickly washed off by the brutal reality of her ordeal. With hesitant steps, she makes her way to me, where I welcome her by taking off my shirt for her to wear. We'll make quite the pair, scuttling to get back safely to the Achewillow. It's tempting to ask Ophelia to contribute to the improvised wardrobe, but a quick glance confirms that my nemesis has other worries. She and her cat are busy tearing through the clearing, digging into the fallen vegetation and occasional animal corpse, hunting for morbid treasures. "Hey, Ophelia, we can come back for those." She doesn't look up. She doesn't even twitch. Her attention is focused on William, the orange cat sitting tall and proud over a particular piece of twisted branch. Determined, Ophelia plunges her wounded and bleeding arms into a pile of broken and torn vines and leaves. Her face tightens at the pain, and she digs for a moment, only to relent once her prize is secured. A human skull. "No," she finally answers, looking deep into the empty orbit of her find. "I'm coming." It isn't the first time I walk through the door of the Achewillow Cafe having witnessed the extraordinary. While every experience has left on me a deep mark, I could always feel comfort in the safety of the dining room and kitchen. The scar on my abdomen tightens, reminding me of when I first came back from a brush with death, but also of how quickly I bounced back and how it helped me decide to make Achewillow my home. Ophelia has retreated to her apartment, nary a word spoken since she finally got her mother's skull free of the Hellgate. Petunia I left at my brother's apartment, where Annabelle was quick to take over her care. They invited me in, and it was tempting to accept and abandon myself to the gentle charge of friends and family. But I had made choices that night, and now I have to face their consequences. When I walk in, the cafe is scrubbed clean. The display is empty, and every chair remains atop its table. Even the floors gleam with that shine only the obsessive can coax out of well-trod ceramic. Tomorrow's opening will be simple, as it always is when Stefan closes for me. I find myself twitching at every sound. A crack from the alley births hope that maybe the raccoons are up to no good and I'll have to stop them. Or maybe the fox is back, ready to take me on another adventure through the Achewillow alleys, uncovering fresh secrets. Even a hunger demon would be welcome at this point. But no. There are no distractions left, no tangents I can allow to carry me from the reality I have to face. Right there, next to my register, sits the small display offering products from Fig's Orchard. It's almost empty, with only a few pots of compote and a jar of apple butter left for sale. From this point of view, they look like rare treasures. After all, will we ever see the likes of them again in the Achewillow Cafe? I want to take them all and squirrel them away in the kitchen, protecting each like a museum piece. There are messages on my phone from Henry. I've seen the notifications, but I dare not open any of them. Their content seems as obvious to me as they are dire. Before I realize what I'm doing, the jar of apple butter flies from my hand, exploding upon the wall over the register. The sound of shattering glass is drowned out by my own cry of rage and impotence. I had it. I could caress the very skin of the miracle I needed to save her, and I let it slip. For what? So Ophelia could get her dead mother's dead skull? The rational part of my mind, the one offering arguments that sealing the Hellgate was the right thing to do, the thing Olivia would have wanted me to do, is silenced by the uninhibited frustration burning within. Apple butter drips from the wall, ruining the impeccable work Stefan left behind. No. The voice coming from my mouth might as well not be my own. Even my body is acting of its own volition, obeying a decision I've yet to recognize. I scamper up the counter, kicking the tip jar and the pile of napkins to the floor. On the tip of my toes, I reach up and tear one of the spoons from the plaque on which it's hooked. The whole display falls to the ground, wooden spoons clattering upon the tiles behind the counter, but I don't care. I even leave my own spoon next to the register for good measure, as if to keep it from witnessing what comes next. My limbs are filled with an energy of purpose bordering on mania. This low-level insanity burns through my nerves, making my fingers quiver and my hands shake. I desperately want to keep a firm hold on whatever it is that drives me. The door to my apartment slams open after a quick, nervous struggle with the key and lock. I spy the paper-wrapped skull sitting unobtrusively in the corner where I had secreted away lest it be found. A mystery for another day. Folly, of course, is the engine that powers my steps. It's a short journey through my apartment, and I don't even need to make it all the way across. Rising doubt, however, slows my steps like mud sucking at my boots. I don't know what it is I expected walking up to the ancient mirror. So many times has the crone beyond the glass demanded her spoon in my dreams that I thought she'd be waiting. The only woman there, eyes sunken into their sockets and hair as wild as the summer wind, is me. Silence consumes the world, turning my narrow corridor into a crypt. I can't say exactly what I'm hoping will happen, or what I pray will be done, but the whole process feels subversive. All this talk of stepping between Olivia and death itself has taken its toll, and I find myself averting my eyes from the many pictures of Doris that crowd the wall. My attention is solely on the mirror. It has to be. Afraid, angry, I swing my arm back, fully intent on smashing the mirror with the spoon. It's only at the very last moment, eyes blurry with tears but with sudden clarity, that I stay my hand. Intent. It's what lies at the heart of all Dufour magic. I'm not here to vent my frustrations and fight against my impotence. Rage will not deliver what I intend. I listen to my heartbeat, allowing it to slow and cool. Once my breathing has reached a more reasonable tempo, one that allows my thoughts coherence, I hold the heavy, thick, crooked spoon of Philomene an inch from the mirror's surface. Then, without further ceremony, I allow it to tilt and lean upon the mirror. A slight tap, like a raindrop hitting a window, disturbs the silence. And the mirror shatters. The Achewillow Cafe is having a banner day. Patrons walk in and out, each carrying cardboard cups of coffee and bags of pastries. The smell of slow-cooked pork and vegetarian chili fills the air, begging pedestrians to walk in from the sidewalk. When lunchtime arrives, it will be glorious. Regulars fill the tables, talking and eating and drinking. Some have notebooks or laptops out, getting work done in the comfort of my establishment. At the counter, Petunia is finishing recounting her travel plans to a rapt and grateful Annabelle. Their energy is infectious, pulling smiles from the patrons who watch from the register as I fill their orders. If I look across the dining room, I can see Ophelia and Gulliver sharing a plate of pastries. Her arms are covered by a long-sleeve blouse, but the plethora of wounds she suffered doesn't seem to bother Ophelia. I suspect magic is involved, but now isn't the time to ask. The two seem content, if a little haunted, but for once, their presence in the Achewillow doesn't bother me. It's barely been a couple of days, and already I feel the weight of circumstances has been lifted. A quick glance at the kitchen timer tells me I still have 20 minutes before I have to take the meat pies out of the oven. Then they'll need to cool down quite a bit, but they'll be ready for the afternoon. These aren't meant for human consumption, but rather to thank Brioche and her family for their help. An easy smile floats upon my lips. For the first time this week, I feel like everything is going to be okay. And what can I get? My habitual greeting is cut short by a new customer. A stranger, but not a stranger. How was I supposed to recognize him? Of all the years I've lived in Achewillow, seeing his face almost every day, never has Ian been without the white robes of the Pilvists. People still wander the streets, their necks craned so they can look up into the sky. Many were born under the great cloud and expected to die under it too. Its absence, as much a mystery as its origin to them, must be jarring. But Achewillow is a town of oddities. A missing cloud, while interesting in the moment, will likely fade into memory with time. Like an old building having been torn down. It will be missed, but there's really no stopping progress. Ian, however, along with his followers, are another story altogether. Across the register from me stands a man who woke up at the crack of dawn every morning just so he could get croissants to feed his goddess. This was the breadth and width of his life, and I took that away from him. I suppose, he says, a surprising smile on his face, I should order some coffee and a croissant. I stand there, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Where's the outburst and outrage? Why is there no rage and resentment? Ian just stands there, clad in an infuriating teal t-shirt and mundane blue jeans. Is that what he wore under his robes? Oh, he remembers something. With a cloud of cream in the coffee. He waits. Ms. Dufour? I'm sorry, I shake my head. I didn't expect... My words trail off. I don't know what to add or how to ask him the obvious. What now? Things are as they were ordained, Ian sighs, wearing that same kind and understanding expression he had the first day we met. Maybe not the way I thought they would unwind, but not that different either. What are you going to do? His smile widens, and for a moment I wonder if he too might have been uncaged. For now, I'm going to have some coffee and taste a croissant, see what all the fuss is about. Then, I don't know. I go through the motion of serving him, picking the biggest, plumpest croissant in my inventory. My attempts to refuse payment are met with unbreakable resistance. Apart from a knowing look exchanged between Petunia and him, Ian's time in the cafe is short and shockingly uneventful. Only once outside, in front of the large window that dominates the sidewalk, does he stop. I watch him look to the sky, allowing the sun to kiss his skin before taking a large, voracious bite of his croissant. Bliss reigns over him while he chews and nods in approval. Make a note that this may very well remain his usual. He's about to walk off again, going his way to finish devouring his croissant and drink his coffee, when Ian backtracks to the front door. For a second, I expect him to storm back in, demanding 2 or 3 more pastries. Instead, he sticks the croissant in his mouth and, using his free hand, pulls the door open for someone. Sitting in a wheelchair, pushed by her taciturn but dutiful husband, she enters the Achewillow. The passage is narrow, making their entrance a noisy struggle. The dining room goes quiet, and Annabelle rushes to help her navigate those last few inches so that her wheels don't get stuck in the door frame. She's pale, her skin ashen and drawn, and she looks exhausted. Yet none of that kept Olivia Figg from putting on a modest amount of makeup, doing up her hair, and slipping on some jewelry. This is no fallen monarch made invalid by her trials, but rather a queen carried upon a palanquin into her throne room. Her smile, beatific and calm, washes over the patrons in silent thanks for their collected awe. My own jaw hangs slack, an insufficient sign of my shock. "Olivia?" I mumble in disbelief. "Coffee," she demands from her seat. 1 cream, 2 sugar. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow. We hate to leave you hanging like this, but if you want a snack between seasons, don't forget to pre-order Achewillow Book 1 to get an exclusive bonus story in September. Go to achewillow.com/book to pre-order.